Now, the chorus of calls for a unity government in Iraq is growing. Britain's Foreign Secretary has been meeting the Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki in Baghdad. William Hague called for a unity government, echoing the message from the US Secretary of State earlier in the week. Now, Iraq's parliament has been ordered to convene next week in the first step towards forming a new government.
The message from the United Kingdom is very clear. We urge all Iraq's leaders and communities to unite. The Iraqi state faces an existential threat, and the growth and expansion of the area controlled by ISIS or ISIL, with huge implications for the future stability and freedom of this country and many other countries. And we believe the single most important factor that will determine whether or not Iraq overcomes the challenge is political unity. And as friends of Iraq, we believe the urgent priority must be to form an inclusive government following on from the recent elections that can command the support of all Iraqis and work to stop terrorists and their terrible crimes.
Foreign Minister Fabius and I discussed each of the individual many hotspots that we are challenged by today. We particularly agree on Iraq, that we want a government formation as rapidly as possible that represents unity for the country.
Well, one of Iraq's most powerful Shia leaders is also calling for a national unity government. Muqtada al-Sadr says Iraq risks spiralling into chaos without a change of leadership. From Baghdad, Imran Khan reports.
From firebrand to potential peacemaker, a man whose militia once fought American troops and al-Qaeda in Iraq says he wants a unity government.
The Iraqi government must fulfill the legitimate demands of the moderate Sunnis and stop excluding them because they have been marginalized for so long. We also need to rush the formation of a national government with new names and from all backgrounds, and not to be based on the usual sectarian quotas.
His words are being echoed by others across the political spectrum. The Kurdish regional Prime Minister Nechirvan Barzani says peace can only be achieved through political means.
What happened was caused by the marginalization of an important component in the Iraqi community, and that's the Sunni component. The Sunnis in Iraq felt that they were not part of the political process in the country, and what happened 2 years ago in Fallujah was a legitimate appeal by the people in those areas, and the Iraqi government was supposed to answer their demands and find a political solution instead of resorting to violence.
But Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki is defiant, and he's sticking to his position. He says he's the only man that can lead Iraq out of this crisis. Now, the next big test for him is on July 1st. That's when Parliament meet to discuss the formation of a new government, and that'll be a government that Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki will want to control.
The call for forming a national emergency government, as they like to call it, is simply an attempt by some in the opposition to launch a coup against our political process in order to destroy it.
So the Prime Minister faces pressure at home and internationally. The British and the Americans say that before they can give any more help, Iraq needs a unity government. Imran Khan, Al Jazeera, Baghdad.
Well, meanwhile, Saudi Arabia has issued an alert for what it's calling potential terrorist threats. King Abdullah has ordered all necessary measures to be taken to safeguard against any threats. Now, US Secretary of State John Kerry, he's due in Saudi Arabia on Friday. Well, as you saw a little bit earlier, John Kerry addressing the media in Paris. He was alongside the French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius. Let's go live now to Ros Jordan, who's in Washington, D.C. It seems ever more clear, Ros, that John Kerry sees the problem in a regional context and also is seeking an international response to the problem.
That's right, and that's because there are many countries, even if they did oppose the U.S.-led war into Iraq, they do have concerns about the ongoing stability of the Iraqi government, and so it is natural for the U.S. to reach out to the U.K., to France, to other countries in the EU, as well as to countries across the greater Middle East, to try to find ways of helping to stabilize the situation inside Iraq. It's heavy lifting, but it seems as if every everyone is willing, at this point at least, to discuss what might be the most efficient way of making a difference without undercutting Iraqi sovereignty.
And with so much pressure on Nouri al-Maliki himself, he seems rather isolated at the moment, and he seems convinced that he's the man to take Iraq forward into the next phase. I'm just wondering whether you're aware whether Mr. Kerry agrees with that and whether he thinks that Maliki is the man to do business with or not.
Well, if you put the question to the Secretary of State or to any of his spokespeople, they will say that it's not for the U.S. to pick who should be the leader of Iraq. That is a matter for Iraqi voters and for the members of the parliament that are going to be meeting by Monday at the latest to try to start this process of forming a new government. That said, there's a lot of frustration with Nouri al-Maliki. There is a widespread belief here in Washington especially that the way Maliki led Iraq in his previous 2 terms did not bode well for the ideal of national unity, that Sunnis were cut out from major policy decisions, weren't given appropriate government portfolios, and there was a similar sentiment among Iraqi Kurds in the north. So there is this sense that someone who can be more of a uniter, to use the word, is probably most required. But as we saw in Imran Khan's piece, Nouri al-Maliki says he won the most votes in the last elections in April, and that unless someone can come forward with the same kinds of electoral qualities that he brought, then he would be happy to step aside.
Okay, Ros, thanks for that. Ros Jordan, our correspondent live in Washington. Well, a couple of other developments in the Iraqi situation. The government saying that it now has control of the country's largest oil refinery. Earlier, Sunni fighters led by the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant said they had seized the Beji refinery, but the government is now saying that more troops have been flown inside the compound in order to fend off the assault. And thousands of Iraqis have been displaced by the fighting, including many Christians. They abandoned their homes in the town of Karakosh, and that's east of Mosul, after they came under mortar attack. They are now seeking sanctuary in Erbil in the Kurdish Autonomous Zone.